So today we're diving into a topic that almost everyone has an opinion about, but very few people actually understand. It's the topic of Social Security. Hey, it's emotional, it's personal, and for a lot of people, it's the foundation of their retirement income. Some folks want to grab it the second they're eligible, others want to wait as long as possible, and many just hope they'll figure it out later. So today we're going to cut through the noise and talk about what actually matters when it comes to Social Security and how to think about it strategically, not emotionally. Hey everyone, Tommy Derfler, Sam Rice here on the Lighthouse Wealth Group Spotlight podcast. And today we're going to be talking about Social Security. So why, does Social Security matter that much?
Yeah, great question. Let's start with the big picture. Social Security is one of the very few income sources that checks three major boxes. It's guaranteed, it's inflation adjusted, and it lasts as long as you do. And that combination is incredibly powerful, especially in a world where market fluctuates, expenses rarely go down, and for many retirees, Social Security ends up covering a significant portion of their basic living expenses. Housing, food, utilities, healthcare, and in some cases, it's the difference between stability and stress. What's interesting is that people often undervalue it because they didn't see the money going in there being invested. It came out of their paycheck automatically, so it doesn't feel like an asset that they've really had, a piece of in the past, even though economically it absolutely is. Unlike other investment accounts, you can't outlive it, you can't mismanage it, and you can't panic sell it during a downturn. That's why the decision around when and how to claim Social Security deserves just as much thought as your investment strategy, if not more.
Absolutely. And so let's talk about the big three claiming ages, okay? Because this is where most of the strategy really lives. First is age 62. This is the earliest you can claim, and it's also the most common choice for a lot of people. And let's be clear about this. When you retire from work, that doesn't necessarily determine when you start taking Social Security. And so the first age is 62 when you are eligible to claim Social Security, whether you're retired or not. And so people often choose it because they're tired of working, they may be facing health issues, or simply just want the income stream to begin. But keep in mind, claiming at 62 permanently reduces your benefits, and that reduction doesn't go away, not at full retirement age, not later, not ever. And if you're married, it can also reduce what a surviving spouse receives down the road. So the next age is full retirement age, which for most people today is between 66 and 67. All right, had to do that. But this is the baseline the Social Security system is built around. When you start taking it at this age, there's no penalties, but there's also no bonuses. Okay, so it's called your full retirement age, and depending on what you're born, it's going to be somewhere between 66 and 67. Then, of course, there is age 70. And for every year you delay past full retirement age, your benefit increases by around 8%. That's a guaranteed return backed by the government, and it's especially valuable for high earners and for couples where one spouse is likely to outlive the other. So this is where the conversation shifts from, hey, when do I want money, to how do I want to protect my future income? So what are some common myths and misconceptions, Sam, that we hear typically in a lot of meetings?
Yeah. Some of the biggest myths and misconceptions that we hear all the time in meetings, I would say first, number one is Social Security going to run out?
Yep.
Yeah. And, there are changes to Social Security rules, but Social Security isn't disappearing. Adjustments could include higher taxes, benefit tweaks, or delayed full retirement ages. But the idea that it's just going to vanish, it's just not realistic. Another big one is, should I take it as early as possible so I get something? And what we see is that mindset usually comes from fear, not really diving into it and doing planning. And that fear-driven decision rarely pans out well for the individual. Another common belief is, I'll just take it early and invest in myself. That sounds logical until you factor in market volatility, a sequence of returns risk, and the fact that Social Security provides a guaranteed inflation-adjusted income over time that investments simply can't replace. The biggest mistake we see, though, is people making permanent decisions based on fear or short-term thinking, though.
Yeah, and to piggyback on that too, if we had the crystal ball, these decisions would be extremely easy, right? But nobody knows how long they're going to live for. And so, one things we have to factor in are, just like you mentioned earlier, longevity, health, the need for income. And so, we get questions all the time. Hey, do you really think Social Security is going to be there? And our answer is yes, we really do. We really think it's going to be there. It's a very solvable problem. The government has said this. The problem a lot of times is, if you start changing the rules for a generation, you're losing votes as far as a politician goes. And that's why politicians don't really want to touch it, because they know this is going to affect somebody. And it's typically going to be the younger generation, people that have a lot of years to plan around this. But they know that they could possibly lose votes because nobody wants to mess with it. And so for politicians, it was always very difficult to be able to do that, because you're probably losing support. And so it makes it more of a political decision, which is pretty sad.
Yeah.
But, if we look at there's other considerations to think about, things like the spousal, survivor, and divorce considerations. And so this is where Social Security becomes much more than an individual decision. If you're married, your claiming strategy affects not just you, but your spouse, especially when it comes to survivor benefits. And so in many households, the higher earner's benefit becomes the surviving spouse's income for the rest of their life. And that makes timing incredibly important. And so if you look at essentially all three, spousal benefits are based on your spouse's work record, even if you never worked or earned very little. Okay, so just to kind of go through these, for spousal benefit, you must be at least age 62 to collect. Your spouse must be receiving Social Security benefits, and you must have been married for at least 1 year. And so the max spousal benefit you can get is 50% of your spouse's full retirement benefit, full retirement age benefit. Okay. And so not 50% of what they actually receive if they file early or if they delay to age 70. So I just want to make sure that's really important to know. And what most people don't realize is Social Security did this because, when it first started, it was very typical for one spouse to work and one spouse to stay at home and take care of the family. And so they didn't want the spouse that didn't work to be penalized and not have access to Social Security for being able to take care of the home, help raise the family, and so on. And so they really wanted to make sure, say, hey, we can't penalize these spouses that, are not in the workforce, because that was very common at the time. And so, that was the main concern, or that was why the spousal benefit was really created for that situation. Well, then you have a divorced spouse benefits, and this is where a lot of confusion happens. But essentially, you can claim benefits on an ex-spouse's record if you were married for at least 10 years, you are currently unmarried, you're age 62 or older, and your ex is entitled to Social Security. So, when we bring this subject up for a lot of divorcees, the first question we get asked is, am I going to have to reach out to my ex-spouse to have to figure this out to be able to file? The answer is no. You don't have to make this a weird, awkward situation. Doesn't have to be like that at all. They do not know anything about you filing um, on their record. So that has nothing to do with their ability to take it, has nothing to do with their ability for the amount that they can take. But that is a common question we get asked. Um, and then, you do have survivor benefits, and this is where the real value often is. So, you got to qualify under certain conditions. You have been married for at least 9 years. Or I'm sorry, 9 months, not 9 years, 9 months. You have to be age 60 or older. Um, and this is where the survivor can receive up to 100% of the deceased spouse's benefit. And so, again, if that were to happen, that means if you collect on a survivor's benefit, it doesn't mean you get to collect yours and the survivor benefit. It just means that you get to collect the higher of the two. Yep. And so that's just really important for a lot of people. Because we regularly see situations where families unintentionally leave tens or even hundreds of thousands of dollars on the table simply because no one walked them through the rules. And this is where thoughtful coordination can make a massive difference in their total income for a long time. So, but, then there comes the whole idea of taxes. So walk us through that.
Well, another big surprise for many people regarding Social Security is how it's taxed. And is it in general? Is it taxed at all? And depending on your overall income, up to 85% of your Social Security benefit is actually subject to federal income tax. And that often catches a lot of people off guard. Granted, there is some legislation proposed right now for the next year that may change that, but as of right now, it's still subject to income tax. It's not just about the benefit itself also. It's also about how the Social Security interacts with everything else in your income world. Your pensions, IRA withdrawals, RMDs, required minimum distributions, and even part-time income. So considering all of that stuff in together and your Social Security dictates how your Social Security is taxed. And then this is really where proactive planning comes into play. Strategies like Roth conversions, timing of income sources, smoothing out tax brackets can really improve those after-tax outcomes for Social Security and your overall income. Because without planning, we really see them pay a lot more in taxes than necessary. And this really happens year after year until you address it, you discover a little bit more, and you can be proactive about it. So, Tommy, you want to talk about when potentially taking Social Security might make sense?
Yeah, and keep in mind, you can take it as early as 62, and, we talked about the downfall of that, but that isn't always necessarily a bad thing. And so just to be clear, taking Social Security early isn't a bad decision across the board. And I think there's two things that really dictate that decision. And one is, obviously, if you need the income. If you need the income, it's there, take it, right? So it's there if you need it. But the other thing is if your health is uncertain. So if working longer isn't realistic, or if peace of mind matters more than maximizing dollars, then early claiming can absolutely make sense. And like I said earlier in the podcast, it's a matter of if we knew what everybody's longevity would be and how long we're going to live for, these decisions would be really, really easy.
Yeah.
And a lot of times we have to look at what's called a break-even point, right? So if the common argument is go ahead and take it now because I'll take it for a far longer period of time, and that should maximize my dollars. But if you look at that, that's not always the case, because the longer you live, the more it hurts you. And so the counter side of that is, but what if I take it at age 70 where I get the highest benefit possible, and then I pass away the very next year, and it's like I didn't get that much from the government. And so that's a valid point too. And so that's what makes these decisions very hard. So what we do, Sam and I, is look at the break-even points to say, hey, listen, if you wait till this age and you start taking it if you can, then if we get past this age, which is typically 77 to 80 years old, if you're trying to maximize it and get the most benefit, you typically have to wait till around 78 to 80 years old. And if you live one day past that age, then you're winning.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, but, like we said, sometimes the emotional return outweighs the financial one, and that's okay too. And I
Mm-hmm.
think the key is that the decision you make is intentional, informed, and aligned with your broader goals.
Yeah. No, that's great. And then, so we've got some quick, tips and questions about Social Security, and just some often things that we hear people asking us. Can Social Security run out? Most likely not, but benefits could change over time. Another one is, can you work while collecting? Yes, but there are income limits before full retirement age. Should everyone wait till 70 to claim? No. It depends on health, income needs, and family considerations. Again, every situation and individual is very individual in their claiming strategy, and that changes for everyone. Does claiming early affect your spouse? It definitely does, especially when you have survivor benefits. So we got a couple big takeaways, I think. Tommy?
Yeah. So to wrap up here, I mean, here's the biggest takeaway is Social Security isn't just a check; it's a strategy. And like any good strategy, it should fit into your life, your goals, and your broader financial plan. So when done thoughtfully, Social Security can create confidence, flexibility, and long-term security. So if you're within, 5 years, uh, usually about mid to late 50s of retiring or claiming, then
Mm-hmm.
you really need, this is probably one of the most valuable conversations we can have. And so our goal is just make sure you're educated. A lot of people just do what their uncle, brothers, cousins said to do with their situation. And like Sam had mentioned earlier, every situation is very personal, very individualized. And
Mm-hmm.
so, just make sure you get educated, you know exactly what your options are. And really by doing that, you'll make the best decision for you and your family. So thanks for spending time with us, and we'll see you on the next episode. Take care.
Bye.